said to them, "The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest." And I hear the word harvest, I think of fields, because here in the Illinois prairie, we have many, many fields of corn, or we have fields of soybean, wheat, other crops. The Illinois prairie is known for this. It is something that if you grew up in this area, you are very familiar with. But of course, today, there are less fields than there were 40 years ago. And yet, the analogy is still fresh in our minds every time we hear these words of Jesus. And elsewhere in the scriptures, we think back to those days of the endless corn, wheat, or soybean fields across the Illinois prairie. The field analogy, where the harvest is taken from, is used by Jesus several times. And here in Illinois, we have an insight into this analogy that Jesus uses, especially as members of this congregation, because St. Matthew was founded in 1863 by a majority of members that were farmers that came from Germany to the United States for a better way of life and to make a name and a place for themselves in God's world by farming and by worshiping as Lutherans. The Bible uses the analogy of the field in several different places. The first place that I noticed this for this morning's message was in Psalm 72. "May there be an abundance of grain in the land. On the tops of the mountains may it wave, may its fruit be like Lebanon, and may people blossom in the cities like the grass of the field." We are the grass. We are the ones out in the field. In Isaiah chapter 40, it says, "A voice says, 'Cry,' and I said, 'What shall I cry?' All flesh is grass, and all its beauty is like the flower of the field." And then Jesus himself uses this, as I said, several times, but he uses this for this morning. I want to bring your attention to Matthew 13, where it says that he, Jesus, put another parable before his people, the disciples and those following him, saying, "The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a man who sowed good seed in his field." I've preached on that text several times as a pastor, and we are the seed planted in the field by God, and God is the man. Paul also uses this analogy in Galatians chapter 3, where he says, "For we are God's fellow workers. You are God's field." And then he mixes the metaphor a little bit. You are God's building. But let's go back to the original metaphor of fields. We are all planted by God. So we are God's plant. Beautiful as the flowers and the grass is in the fields today. But you know that there was a problem. Adam and Eve brought sin and death into the field. And so now we are all dying plants. There is the sin that we can liken to mutation or weeds, even as Genesis talks about. That is the result of sin in the world, that Adam, who would be a farmer, would be sowing his crop, but there would be weeds that would grow up in it as well. We have a problem. But Jesus is the answer. Jesus overcomes the weeds, the dying plants by himself dying. He overcomes sin. And so he brings water to the plants so that he can bring life to the plants. He was born, he lived, he died, he rose, he ascended. And so that life-giving water of the gospel brings us back to life as God intended us to be out in the fields. Another analogy that is often used of a field is in the song, "O Beautiful for Spacious Skies," a fruited plain here in America. And this weekend we celebrate the founding of the United States of America. Our birthday usually referenced as July the 4th in the year 1776, because that was the day that Congress, the Continental Congress meeting in Philadelphia, ratified the Declaration of Independence, declaring themselves free from tyrannical England of the 17th century, 16th, 18th, 17th century, 1700s. And if you look at the Declaration of Independence, as I have done over the last couple days, you will see God and gospel all over it. Maybe not specifically referenced. Jesus is not referenced in the Declaration of Independence, nor is the Bible, but it is there, sort of in, with, and under the words that Jefferson put together. Nature's God, creator, supreme judge of the world, divine providence. It's there. They believed that they were one under God in this world. They may have had different ideas about God, which is the beauty of our country, that we all can have the freedom to have these different ideas. And so we are gathered together today in that freedom that they started in 1776. If you go to the U.S. Constitution, which was ratified about 11 years later in 1787, 89, putting together the ratification, the First Amendment to the Constitution is all about religion, the freedom of religion, that we may gather as we wish, and the government can't say you must go to this church, and the government cannot say you must follow this religion. It gives us, or it reinforces in us, the freedom of religion and limits government so that we may worship as we wish. And so we do. We are gathered together as Lutheran Christians in this place. And so I must ask the question, why are we here? Why are we here in a free country? Because God has planted us here. He has put us here at this time and in this place to give us a calling to harvest God's crop of people by sharing with them the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so we come back to our vision. We can see around us boundless need, all around us. We have the answer, the solution to that need. It is the boundless love of Jesus that is poured out on us like water from heaven, causing us to live and to grow and to flourish. And because God has placed you and I in this specific time and place, we have a freedom to be able to go out and tell people that Jesus will meet all their needs, perhaps even through our own hands and our own treasures, to help them wherever they are, to help them raise their children in a godly way, to help them with whatever need happens to be first and foremost in their lives. That boundless love of Jesus, which has been given to us, is also given to them through us. And the result of that will be to live with boundless hope. Hope for life abundant now and life eternal when Christ comes back to take us home in heaven. Why are we here? To harvest God's crop with the boundless love of Jesus, in whose name, amen.